You are listening to Interesting Canadian Mormons, a podcast featuring conversations with interesting Latter-day Saints from across Canada. I am your host, Samson Nordquist. Today, my guest is Ayse Hitchins, co-author of the book, The Worth of a Soul. She has served on the translation committee for the Book of Mormon into the Turkish language, and she is currently on the translation committee for the Doctrine Covenants. Discover with me what makes Ayse Hitchins an interesting Canadian Mormon. And today I'm extremely excited to have the guest that I have. Her name is Ayse Hitchins. Ayse is, she's the co-author of a book. It's titled The Worth of a Soul, and it's published by Covenant. It is a heart-wrenching memoir that chronicles her life from growing up in Turkey to the present day, living here in Canada. It chronicles her journey. It's a story of, it's a sort of from riches to rags to riches story. It chronicles her faith journey from Muslim to atheist to Mormon. And there's so many interesting things. And I just want to let everybody know that the book is available at Deseret Book, also at Amazon and other various outlets. And if you're like me and you really are not a really good reader, you can also get the book as an audio book. And I've listened to the audio book, and it is an amazing story. It'll make you cry, it'll make you laugh, and I recommend, because it's such a powerful story, I recommend anybody to listen to it. So, without further ado, hello, Ayse.
Hello, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's an honor, and thank you. We're here in Ayse's home in Mississauga. And so, just right off the top, you mentioned that you've not actually read the book.
No, I have not read the book, nor did I listen to the book in any of the audio versions of it.
which is really kind of interesting and kind of strange, how you wrote a book and have not read it yet. And do you plan to ever read it?
I don't plan to read it.
Don't plan to ever read it?
No, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to listen to it either.
Interestingly, and why is that?
Well, while we were working on the project, it became too obvious to me. Probably people will not be seeing it as such, but that for every line you read, I have 10 more lines to think about, or 10 more lines to think about, or go through, or remember, or something that it's going to become too long.
Oh boy!
And some of the things that I have talked about during the interview with the co-author, it is not easy to go through the journey once over again, and that was good enough. I don't think I'll be redoing it for the third time.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Just so our listeners know, the other co-author of the book is Kristen McKendry, and I interviewed Kristen. It's episode number 2, which is she's an incredible person, and she has a couple of interesting things to say about this book during that interview, and so I'm just referring to that. I hope that this interview is okay. I'm wondering if we'll go down certain roads.
Sure, not a problem. No, I can talk about it.
Okay.
It's kind of like more therapeutic to talk about it than just read about it or hear about it. So
okay, okay, and in some ways I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I do some writing. I write music and lyrical stuff, but I understand when you read one line, you're thinking of 10 more. You wish like, oh, I didn't put that in there, and how come that's not in there? And I'm sure it must have been Kristen talks a little bit about how difficult it was to, over the course of 2 years, she interviews you at different intervals.
Yes.
And how to squeeze that much data into
so many pages of a book.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think she did a fabulous job. It really
is.
Thank you.
She's been a great friend, and she is a great friend, and she's been a great support throughout all our dealings with one another. And more than anything, I guess we're sisters in the gospel, and we do understand each other, in a different level than perhaps people who are just reading the book. So
that must be very interesting to have that connection with you.
It was awesome.
Yeah. And one thing more that I want to mention as well before we get too far is that, and we'll talk about this later on, but you are on the you were on the translation committee.
Correct.
For the Book
of Mormon. Yes.
Translating it into Turkish.
Turkish, yes.
That's very fascinating, and perhaps that'll be the section 2 that will. In this portion, we'll talk. So we'll talk about this. We'll talk about kind of your background and a little bit of your story in this portion. The next portion, we'll talk about that fascinating thing that work that you've done. And from what I've read, you're currently in the process of translating the Doctrine Covenants?
Yes, I'm in the committee to translate into Turkish.
Okay, definitely. We're going to talk about that too. Okay. So, can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you were born?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Turkey in 1960, and at the age of about 2.5, I was adopted by my aunt, who couldn't have any children, and the aunt is my biological father's older sister. And back in those days, it wasn't unusual for family members, if they couldn't have a child, can go back to another family member and say, can you lend me one? So that's how my journey in Istanbul started. I was born in a very rural community, but I ended up in a very big city. I grew up there. But when I was about in my mid-teens, came back to the rural area to meet my biological parents. And that was like a shock to my entire system.
Right. In the book, it says, the reader is led to believe that this is your mother the whole time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And then it's a shock. Was it? I mean,
yes.
It's presented that way. Was it?
I did not know because I grew up in a boarding school. I really didn't have much dealings with my parents. My parents, as in biological parents, as well as my adopted parents.
Just parents in general.
Just parents in general. So I was raised by wolves in a forest. No. I had a hard time when I came back to really connect with my parents, biological parents.
Yeah.
And being a teenager itself was a hard enough thing to do, and then all of a sudden you have this huge, difference in lifestyles, difference in the socioeconomic status, everything was different. So
yeah, it mentions that your adopted parents were in a different social class than your biological parents. Correct.
My father, who raised me, my uncle, who was a chemical engineer, who was working in a factory, and my biological father doesn't know how to read and write, and he still is a very poor man. Retired from a city worker who basically worked on the streets, as a laborer. So
yeah,
very different.
Now, you mentioned about the age of 2.5, and sort of and when you were a teenager. These are sort of general terms, because in the book it mentions that you actually don't know your age.
No, I do not.
You don't know your birthday, or you don't know?
No, I don't, because my parents who registered me, my biological parents, have done some errors in registration, and it came to that nobody actually knows which year they registered me for, and
even they don't remember.
No, back in those days, It wasn't really that important. Sometimes the siblings passed and you didn't want to pay for another registration. You basically moved one sibling's spot to the next sibling's spot, sort of thing. They don't remember when it was. They even think, one of them thinks this is spring, the other thinks it's autumn. My mother thinks it was summer. I believe my mother, because she would remember.
Yeah, you trust that one a little more, right?
I think so too.
So at the beginning, you said 1960. Now, is that sort of...
It's my registered year.
Okay.
1960.
And do you sort of generally accept that yourself? That's the most likely?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is, it's kind of... Yeah. That's kind of odd for this culture.
It is. For the Westerners, it's very odd. But when you live in my society in 1960s, 1960s, it isn't really that odd.
And, I have spent some time with some Native Americans up on a reserve, and there were guys on the reserve that they didn't know when their birthday was either. It wasn't really that important.
It wasn't that important. To me, today, even today, it's not that important to me. One time I remember asking my paternal grandmother how old she was, and she said, I don't know how old I am. She said, I've been living since the day I was born.
Good answer. Wow. All right, so Your in your early childhood, when you were in the boarding school, and the book kind of goes into. There's several chapters that are you in this boarding school and everything. How was that whole experience growing up by these, basically non-parents, but they were your parents, I guess.
Yeah.
Were they parental figures or?
Well, when you're in a school setting at a young age, you really don't look for comparisons between parents, and because you're at a stage of you're just discovering the world. To me, it didn't really matter at the time, but now looking backwards, I guess it did make a difference, but I didn't know what the difference was. So the teachers became everything to me. So I really didn't question until I got probably later on to university years when I started to question about, the meaning of the life, meaning of the world, meaning of everything. So then I realized what I'd been missing. But at the time, it didn't matter.
Was it a secular school? Or?
Secular school,
it was,
yes.
eh?
It was correct, yeah.
All right. All right, so when you talk a lot about your father.
Yes, my father who raised me, yes.
Right from the beginning of the book, and he plays a very, very important role all throughout.
Yes, even today. Yeah,
is he
today.
Is he your hero?
He is my hero, and he will always be my hero, till the eternities, I guess, folded, and then we will know who the real heroes are, but until that day, he is my hero.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he was a very unique individual. As far as I can remember, he has always been my father, and that has never changed. He never raised his voice, never said an unkind word, and he never did anything to hurt my feelings in any way. He was I could say probably had prophet-like qualities, that he had the long-suffering, the gentleness, the meekness, humility. He was very... He was a very special person. He raised me with the understanding that I was a special soul and I would find my way one day. And he had belief in me that I didn't have in myself. And he always encouraged me to do good, encouraged me to go above and beyond. To him, becoming a good citizen to any place that I was at was important. He wanted me to be helpful, be tolerant. And in whatever I did, he said, take great pride in whatever you do. He never questioned my decisions. Some decisions were stupid, but he was always standing beside me, even when I made errors. He would point me in the right direction, but he would say, this is your opportunity to grow. This is your free agency. Some things are not good. But even when I made the errors, he was there.
It's very, very interesting. These are all very... important principles, and as Latter-day Saints, these are all principles that we share. But what faith?
He was Muslim, but he was not a practicing Muslim. He had some core beliefs that, as I mentioned, that he never wavered from. And when I found out about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and started learning about the principles, it wasn't that difficult for me at all, because those are some of the things I practiced anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was he? Did he believe in God?
Yes, he believed in God. Okay. He believed in the life after death. He believed in, this world was a world of tests, and either you make it or you don't make it. But he also believed in having chances, like some of the rigidness of the Muslim faith. He thought it was too restrictive, that once you break some certain tenets, you cannot come back. That he didn't believe in that. Yeah.
Was Turkey? Was it an environment where you could have a diversity of belief, and that was okay, or was
when I was growing up, no, but now, yes.
Okay.
We have more diversity in Turkey than we have ever had, probably. Yeah.
So would he have been kind of shunned by society, or for his belief, or his lack of?
Well, he didn't fit in the society that he was at anyway, because he was this, very, very talented, very capable individual who commanded a lot of workers in his field, in a factory, and now he was living in this very rural community in one little mud room that he's built because he promised he was always going to take care of us. he really didn't care so much what others were thinking of it, because he made a covenant with the Lord that he was always going to take care of us until the day he died, and he kept his promise.
That's quite remarkable. Yeah. Actually, that's it must have been. I was listening to this story, and that is so awkward. You mentioned that you had to leave the school. I mean, it was a private school. Yes. It was very well taken care of, and very affluent parents.
Right.
Your aunt and your uncle.
Right.
Right. Or really your mother and father. Right.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
What were the circumstances that caused you to have to leave and go to really live with your biological
circumstances parents? Were very sad, actually. When I came home one time, I figured it out during their argument that I wasn't really their child. So that wasn't really a good way of finding out that all these years you believe in something and all of a sudden that was no longer the case. And when my mother, my adopted mother, my aunt, when she decided that I was no longer welcomed in the house, my father finally said, if they go, I go. So that was it. So in 74 or 75, we left. So it wasn't really a good time to discover all these things were happening, because first of all, I'm a teenager. I'm used to a certain way of life. And then all of a sudden, my mom, who raised me, says, I don't want you in the house anymore. I don't want your brother in the house either. All of you get out of my house. And my father finally says, I am getting you out of your home, but I will never come back. And then he takes us on this journey to come back to this rural town, that the parents that I've never met before.
Yeah.
And here I am with siblings that I've never met before.
And these are your actual...
These are my actual siblings.
Actual biological siblings.
Correct.
A whole new family.
Whole new family, yeah.
Wow.
But it was never a family. It was just a place to be at.
Yeah.
Because a year and a half later, I left the house anyway. I couldn't stand it anymore. So I went into an exams in another city, signed my own exam entrance, did my own thing, and then left the house. That was it.
And I think, did he still have employment? Was he still
He was
working?
retired at that time.
He was retired.
He was retired, yeah.
And I think one might think, well, why doesn't he just raise you on his own? But then...
He couldn't, because we were not legally adopted. That would have been abduction of children.
Oh,
he
right.
would have gone to jail. He had to come back to my parents.
Because they could claim legal custody.
But you couldn't even register me into school or anything, because you need papers. My last name was never their last name. So they never legally adopted us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would have had problems.
And we haven't... I know we're kind of going really fast through the story,
sure.
but you mentioned your younger brother.
Yes.
You mentioned in the book, one day you come home, and there is your new brother.
Yes,
right?
my new brother. When I left for boarding school, my mother, who is mentally challenged, but she would have never admit to it at those days. I guess she never really admitted to it. She thought she was getting lonely and getting bored, so she wanted another child. So she went back to the same family and said this time she wanted a little boy, and the little boy was my brother, and nobody else fit the description, because she wanted somebody who was around 2 years of age. And while I was gone in school, she brought him to Istanbul. So
yeah. And at the age that you were,
yes.
Roughly how old were you when that?
I am okay. Let's put it this way: I'm 54 and he's 48.
Okay, all right. So
no, 50. Sorry, I'm 54. He's 50. So there's 4 years between us. Yeah.
Okay.
When I was entering into what we call it the secondary school, middle school, he was just entering into grade school. So we have about that many years between us. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And that just seems really odd, how you can just go to a family and say, hey, I want one of your children, and they say, okay, here you go. That just seems really bizarre for Western ears.
But now that I look from the perspective of Gospel of Jesus Christ, I am kind of thinking these people are not very well, educated, established people. In hindsight, they were probably thinking these people are rich, these people have the finances and the resources. why not have the children have the opportunity to have a different life? So I don't judge them anymore. I did for a long time, but I don't anymore.
Actually,
don't
you do mention that in the later part of your book.
Yes.
You talk about how this...
forgiveness, exactly. This process is a long one, but it's a worthwhile one.
Yeah. Talk about your entrance into school. I guess, is it called middle school or?
Well, it was high school.
High school, okay.
You mean when I left the house?
Yeah. Now, is that
high school?
That's high school.
High school. Yeah, it was in Konya, another city. It was 105 kilometers away from my home.
Now, is this
that's a boarding school?
Is this the teachers'
college? Yeah.
Okay.
But it turned out to be not a teachers' college because in the middle of the academic period, they decided they're not going to do it anymore, so they changed it. So
first off, to us in Canada, middle school is grade 7, grade 8. Is that roughly the same?
It will be for us 6, 7, and 8. So the first 5 years will be your grade years.
Okay.
Then what we call it as a middle school is the 6, 7, and 8, and then from 8, 9, 10, and 11 will be 9, 10, 11 will be the high school.
So from grade 6, 7, and 8, that's the teachers' college? Or is it afterwards?
High school years will be the 8, it will be 9, 11, and 9, 10, and 11.
Okay.
Yeah, 9, 10,
so
11.
9, 10, 11, and by the time you're done,
yes,
if everything went as planned, you would have been a teacher?
Yes, but it would have been another year. It would have been 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Okay.
But that they reduced.
But then something happened, and they just said,
They
"Okay,
changed
we're no longer a teachers' college. We're just a
regular high school." Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that must have been so disappointing.
It was very disappointing. We even boycotted it, but it didn't really matter.
I'm very. You mentioned that in the book how you boycotted. You actually exercised some political action.
Absolutely, but nobody cared.
And you were so young, and
we were very young,
and no one cared. But what did you learn from that whole experience?
That you don't trust the government. They can change their minds anytime.
Because this is just a precursor to some of the later political things that you've gotten involved with.
Exactly, because don't forget, we're talking about a very volatile time in history in some of the countries in the world. That in the late 70s and early 80s were very turmoiled years for us as people who are growing up in the system. So we were very anti-system and, anti this, anti that, because we just didn't think that the system was working for us. So, and in some regards, it really wasn't working for the people of, worth of saying anything, but if you went with the system, it was okay.
Now, was the system, was it communist?
No, it's
or
not.
Was it?
It's a democratic system.
It was democratic, okay.
But when the military coup happened, like in 1981, I was in the smack dab middle of that when it was happening. It was nothing democratic about it, so there were a lot of turmoil.
Because in the book it was you were an activist, but you were a communist activist.
Yes, correct. I really believed in communal living. Now that I look back, it's interesting. What I was saying to myself and everybody else was saying there is a better life out there if we all live together in harmony and peace and if you have plenty shared with others. So I was all for the communal living. It was like united order, so to speak.
Right. Actually, you mentioned that one of the things that attracted you to Mormonism was this learning about the law of consecration.
Consecration, exactly. People who can make a difference in the world by paying tithing, paying fast offers, building temples. It doesn't really matter who you're benefiting as long as you're benefiting someone who cannot benefit themselves otherwise. I've always believed in that.
Yeah. In the early church, like in the after Christ set up his church, they lived with all things in common.
Absolutely. So I was for that communal living, that people who had the ability to make a difference in human life should make a difference in human life.
Yeah. Interesting. It's funny because to our Western ears, when someone says communism, there's a whole bunch of ideas and thoughts that come to mind that may not have been the ideals that you were going for necessarily.
That's right.
Because in Western culture, we were raised to to believe that communism is sort of the great, the whole Cold War is democracy versus communism, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, was it different in Turkey though? Was it, communism was, whatever it was better than the system that was there?
Absolutely, yeah. We believed very firmly that if people started living in communities rather than becoming I versus you versus whoever, we thought that by coming to some kind of an understanding that life is for all of us. So why shouldn't you be a worker during the day but poet by night? Yeah. Why there isms, so many isms that divide people? Even today, I firmly believe, even with the gospel of Jesus Christ today, that we become divisive amongst ourselves. We pay too much attention to what people wear, what people do, where they live, what their socioeconomic situation is, who are the CEO of a company. To me, when you are, for example, attending the temple, when you leave the world behind, when you are side by side sitting with someone, you will never know who that next person is. Is a person of great worth financially or person who's broke. You will never know that. Right. And to Christ, it doesn't really matter either.
Everybody's equal.
Everybody's equal.
Yeah. Mind if I close it?
So to me, it doesn't. It's not what you are, but who you are that matters.
I thought one of the funniest parts in the book was when you and your husband were going to play a game together.
Yes,
you were going to play
Monopoly. I hated that game. I still do.
Everybody loves Monopoly.
I don't think so.
But you make some very, very interesting points. He beat you at the game
over and over again.
Over and over, and you threw the game and said, "This is
ripped the pages." Yep.
That's what did you say? That's a
capitalist game.
Yeah, that's a stupid capitalist game.
It is a stupid capitalist game.
Where the only way to win is where other people
lose.
To impoverish and make broke the other players.
Exactly.
That's the only way that you win.
To me, I still don't enjoy it.
And that's a very good observation because everybody goes up playing Monopoly, but that's so true. Everybody.
But see, to succeed in life, you shouldn't be really stepping on someone's back to do it.
Yeah, very fascinating. So you later on went to university.
Correct.
In what city was it?
Ankara, the capital
Ankara.
city.
That's the capital,
yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's funny, some people think Istanbul is the capital, but it's actually not, right?
No. For various reasons, and most important one was that it couldn't be overtaken from outside. When Atatürk became the leader at the very beginning, 1919, he didn't want any enemies to be able to come inward because the defense was too strong. Nobody could enter. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why he made Ankara the capital city.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you were there for four years?
Well, I was there for more than 4 years, but yes, for university years, yes.
Okay. And you were studying music?
Yes, correct.
Now I do want to talk to you a little bit about that because in the book it doesn't talk too much about your musical talents and abilities. But what is it that you play, or what is?
Well, I played the flute recorder was a must. You had to have it, and voice also was a must. And I played the piano. Yes. Not anymore. I played the piano.
Okay. Awesome. And so what kind of career were you going for?
Well, what it was that when I was in faculty, there were stipulations. If the government gave you money, you became music teacher and you were sent to eastern part of Turkey, most likely, to serve your country for a little bit and in return, and then you come back and do more teaching elsewhere. When I finished school, I did not really want to go anywhere, so I kind of like abdicated from the throne, so to speak. So I gave up teaching and I didn't go anywhere. So
okay. Mm-hmm. During a portion of that period, to go to school, it was very difficult for you.
Very difficult.
Difficult financially.
Yep.
Must have
emotionally.
Been emotionally.
Everything. Yeah.
Didn't you? I think you had to walk.
Long distances because I absolutely had no money. I mean, when I say no money, I say absolutely no money. I didn't even have a bus fare to go to.
How long of a walk did you have to go?
One time I was walking 2.5 hours each way.
My My goodness, that is so far. That's like driving to Windsor and back from where I'm from.
I know.
So, and during this time, without having the fare for a bus, you didn't even have money for food.
No, I didn't. Yeah, it was a very sad time in my life. My father passed away. My father who raised me passed away.
Yeah.
And my mother who raised me said, I don't really care. My parents said, we don't care. Because they actually told me they didn't really care for someone who was in school because they didn't really look too favorably upon people who were attending school.
Right. So just socially, going to school was sort of like a luxury.
Yes, and also a daughter attending school wasn't all that great at those days. Like they didn't want people to rub shoulders with male population and do stuff, You
were breaking all kinds of social boundaries.
I've always been breaking.
And so the attitude was like, well, if you're choosing to go to school, you're on your own.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I didn't really have I didn't really have any relationship with my parents while I was in school. They kind of disowned me, and I kind of left them behind. So it was a two-way agreement. Yeah.
But you got through it.
I got through it.
It's quite remarkable. It talks about periods where you were eating from garbage cans.
Correct.
Which is
not good.
Like starting from going to a private school.
Yes. Yeah.
And really, I mean, with your chemist father. Very, very well-to-do, and then down to to walking to school, eating from garbage cans, and then
whatever it takes. If something kicks in you survive.
Yeah. And I think you were staying with somebody, but they couldn't help you food-wise.
No, they couldn't. No, I was just earning a little bit of money to survive in the school.
Yeah. How did that affect your grades?
My grades were good, not bad. I could have had it better, definitely better, but it was okay. Not bad.
Now, I'm not sure where it is. I forget where. You had a very bizarre episode happen to you.
I've had many bizarre episodes happen to me. I don't know which one you're talking about.
The one I'm referring to is where you were on the bus. Now, I think you were working. You got a job to help you get through school. You got a job working for the bus
company. Yes. I was in a bus station.
One of the perks is you get to ride for free anywhere you want.
Anywhere we were in Turkey. If you wanted to go in Turkey, you could have a free ride.
And you took advantage of that. You went around
many times.
And it says that you. Tell us a little bit about what happened. You had.
I think you're talking about when I lost my mind.
Yeah,
that's right.
If you could put it that way.
That's right. Well, I took a trip to southern Turkey. And when I got there, I was going to visit with twin siblings that were friends of mine. And I went to the city. And after that, I remember arriving, but after that, I don't remember anything. Then they later told me that I was very, very sick, and they got scared. So they put me in this minibus to send it to the bigger city where they had a better hospital. And somebody found me and took me to the hospital. And there is a period of time in my life I really don't remember what happened. So they tell me that I fell into a coma. I wasn't really doing too well. I guess when you're in a coma, you don't do too well.
Yeah.
But I was doing really, really not so well because they thought I was dead. So they take me to the morgue.
This is the most bizarre part. You are actually declared dead.
Yes. Because the tests were I was not showing any signs of life during the tests.
My goodness.
So they were doing the prickings and the nodding and the probing. Nothing was happening.
Your heart rate was gone?
Gone, yeah. So, but later on I learned that when the mind is under incredible stress, it shuts itself down so much. And my story is actually not unique. I went on the websites many times over. And there are many people around the world declares same experiences. Your body shuts down so badly that they think it's gone because it doesn't respond to anything. So they thought I died.
It's a defense mechanism
exactly.
of the brain.
Yeah, it shuts itself down so badly. Your temperature goes. It was like they told me that I was blue and purple and didn't breathe, and there was no heart rate, and so they take me. Don't forget. We're talking about who knows what kind of a hospital, who knows what kind of a doctor. If the doctor was looking over 1,000 patients, do you think he cares about one patient is not doing too well, I don't
Right.
blame anybody. So,
Right.
and they told me that the cleaner found me in the morgue because I was moving again. So I guess like a reptile, you know.
I wonder what he thought. There's someone moving down there.
That's right.
And so they revive you, and
Well, I kind of revived myself, I guess. I was thinking like, you know, the snake, when it's very cold, it goes into this shock and they think like it's dead. But when it sees warmth, it comes back to life.
my goodness. So you could have, that could have been the end right there.
That could have been the end right
If
there.
they had-
But I'm thinking the Heavenly Father had more things in store for me, and He was preparing me in some strange ways to teach me to survive, you know. I'm a survivor.
You certainly
You can
are.
put me in any condition, and almost in any condition I'll survive.
You're tough as nails.
Tough as nails. I think I'm tougher than the nails.
Okay, so after that episode, it talks about you recovering in the hospital.
Yes,
for,
and they
a
put me in
month,
the
or-
psychiatric ward
Yeah.
because they thought I wasn't doing, you know, well. And I wasn't doing well. I'm actually appreciative that they put me in such a place because that gave me the will to survive. And I didn't eat, I didn't drink, I lost a lot of weight. I not only I was seeing double, I think I was seeing like quadruple
Oh,
because I
really?
wasn't doing too well. I went down to like
Is your-
80 some odd pounds, you know. But it gave me the will to survive because I started singing, and the nurse figured it out that she had this nurse's station in the hospital, the ward. And in the evening, she would just listen to music, and I would hear the music and I would sing the tunes, and some words will come to my mind. She figured that I was musically connected somehow, somewhere. So, to make the long story short, she one day figured it out that I must be a music student, and she started calling if anybody's missing, and the school was missing me.
Oh, so now during this time,
Yes.
which you don't remember any of it,
No,
they would probably ask you questions and you wouldn't respond, or you wouldn't.
no, I didn't know my name,
wow.
didn't know my age, I didn't know where I was from, and things like that. But that's very, very common. I'm not taking ownership of an extremely unique story. It's not. There are a lot of people, probably millions of people in the world shares the same story as I do. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Absolutely. Yep. You shut down. Yeah.
having a
Absolutely.
Basically, that's a dissociative
Absolutely.
episode.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is, like you say, that's not, it's not unheard of. But really, for most people listening to this, that's unheard of.
Remarkable. They tell me that. I think in a way, I think myself that Heavenly Father is aware of our afflictions, but He has to tell when to stop.
Yeah.
We don't tell Him when to stop because I've tried Him in the past. He doesn't stop it, but He will give you the ability to carry it. So I think that's when the atonement of Jesus Christ steps in. We don't take advantage of it so often because we talk about it, we learn about it, but until you go through an extremely difficult circumstance, you really don't understand what power it is, because it will never remove your burdens, but it will help you carry it.
Well, certainly, we each have our own trials. You certainly had a very remarkable trial.
I paid my dues in the beginning.
Not everybody comes back from the dead.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
No, but not everybody has to come back from the dead. But that's quite an amazing thing, because after that point, it seems to me that that's a turning point.
It was a turning point for me. Yeah, correct.
You had made a decision, I think, when you had gotten well enough to go back home.
Yes.
They bought you a ticket to go back to the university.
Yes, I did.
And you had made a decision
Yes.
to
Carry on. Yeah.
To make a change as well.
Yes, yeah.
It mentions that you had a problem stealing.
Yes, I
when you
did.
were
I did
younger.
when I was younger, yeah. And I left everyone's everything back to their doors. Anything that I've ever stolen.
You
from
went
a
and
house,
returned everything
I
back.
returned, and that was my turning point for.
And
I made a covenant with the Lord that I was never going to do that again. I was never going to lie, and I was never going to cheat, and I didn't do too much cheating, but I was never going to lie, and I was never going to steal.
Good.
Yeah.
That's quite amazing. Now, at this point, where was your where were you on the faith spectrum? Were you?
I was atheist.
You were, as an atheist, making a covenant with the Lord.
That's
Sounds
right.
really, really
is.
interesting.
Because see, we are very limited in our human thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I was very anti-religion because the religion that I trusted once, I thought, in my humble opinion, was working against me. Because of so many people were saying so many different things, you get to a point that you cannot carry any of them anymore. So why make a promise you cannot keep? And therefore I said, this cannot be for me, because God cannot be this confusing. You cannot have too many opinions about the same thing. So I said, I'll believe in God, but I have no religion. So they told me, the learned people, if you don't believe in religion, then you can't really have a God. I said, then I'm an atheist. I don't believe in anything. Finished. But little did I know that I still believe in God, but I didn't have a name for it because I didn't want to be questioned too much to explain myself. How can you believe in God and yet don't believe in the religion?
That makes sense. But it's kind of like your father then.
Yes.
He believed in God.
Yes,
very
he
much
believed
so.
in God very much so. Yeah.
Wow,
And at the time, I was very angry too. I was thinking, if God is such a loving God, why is he just loading on me and loading on me and loading? I can't take it anymore. And years later, I look back and I'm thinking, God wasn't loading on me. I was loading myself with my poor choices, Yeah.
In the book, it talks about later on in this period where you are very active politically.
Yes.
So, I mean, that can't be... I don't know how you get through school with all of these things going on.
But it wasn't only me, though. Think about this is the early 80s. We had to do what we had to do.
Yes, there was... And there was...
We're very anti-establishment because the things were happening. It was happening in such a vicious and such a fast pace. Either you were with it or you were against it. There was really no room for in the middle.
Was it about half
left
and half?
and right?
There was like half of the students were on the left, half were on the right.
Because anybody who was in the middle was getting killed, not killing, twice. Because two groups were hounding you all the time. I believed in what I believed in. I was part of a group, but I remember having friends didn't want to do anything. They just wanted to get education and get out of there. Couldn't do it.
And both sides were saying...
Both sides were just hounding them.
Were they saying, if you're not with us, you're against us?
Against us, exactly, yeah.
Right,
so.
Right. My goodness. So when did you... Okay, you eventually finished school.
Yes. And I met my husband.
So, okay, yeah, talk a little bit about that. Because that's kind of a very interesting, very pleasant
Yes, it was.
well.
Actually, that was a very low point in my life when I met him. Because I wasn't really going anywhere and I knew that there wasn't too much prospect of going anywhere. But I wasn't really looking for someone to marry or, to get out of my circumstances. That wasn't my aim. It just happened out of nowhere. So when I was working in a real estate agent, this is
after school?
After school. Okay. This young gentleman comes looking for a place to live and looking for an apartment, and just happens that we met in the office and then we became friends, and short time later, here we are. 4 months later, we got married.
4 months?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about
February to June, February to June, that's right.
And I guess in that time, so when in 4 months, not only are you getting married to somebody,
yes,
but you picked up a faith.
That's right, yeah.
In 4 months. Yeah. You decided to get baptized as
well.
Well,
I see it this way. I don't think I picked up a faith. I think faith picked me up. Because I had certain qualities in me that I always believed that I will hold steadfast to. But as I said, I didn't have a name for it. So when I took the first discussion, within 10 minutes I was ready for baptism. But they told me there were like 6 discussions to take.
Right.
And the people around me challenged me. They said, you're going through a phase because it looks so kind and cute and all that. But I told them I don't think so. I said, you'd meet me 50 years later. If God is willing, we will still, talk about this, but you will still see me. I'll be strong in the faith, because I knew this was the right thing to do for me. Yeah.
It sounds like all of your experiences prior had been preparing you.
Exactly. Yeah. I think God saw the worth of a soul in me that I didn't see in myself. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. You talked about coming to Canada. So it was
Yes.
like you get married and
Yep.
right away you moved?
June 16 we got married, and November 17th I moved to Canada.
All right. So did he get to stay in Turkey for that time, or did he have to go back home?
He came back to home for a week, and he wasn't supposed to be back to Turkey, but they told him that he had unfinished business, so a week later he was returned, so it was really good.
Oh, wow. What a
right.
treat.
What a treat, that's right.
So really, this is the first half of the book.
Yes.
Is
all the sadness.
And in my mind, yes,
Sad
very
years.
much so. All the sad
Exactly.
years and all the happy years in the second half of the book.
Exactly.
It's very much divided right at that.
When I met my husband.
When you met your husband.
Exactly, yeah.
And for me, as a Canadian listening to this, the first half of the book is this story about someone in a very far and distant land.
That's right, yeah.
But then all of a sudden, in the second half of the book, it's this person that is this Canadian now.
I'm becoming one of you now.
You're a Canadian, and you're talking about living in Mississauga, and you're talking about some of the people you mentioned. I know some of those people.
That's nice, yeah.
And I thought,
I find that world is a small place, and
It is.
eventually we become full circle.
For sure.
It's just, I truly believe that we have a purpose in this world, and as we go towards the end of our purpose, which more years behind me than I have ahead, I'm thinking I'm coming full circle now.
Yeah.
Forgiving my parents, trying to help them. My mom right now has stage 4 cancer, and she's gonna pass. I don't know when, but
This is
my biological
your biological
mother,
mother.
My other mother passed away 2008.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking, the miracle of forgiveness is working in me so much so that I cannot think any other way but to forgive and forget and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of that's the feeling I get at the end of the book.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no bitterness.
There is no bitterness.
No.
You free yourself. As I said earlier, we talk a lot about the atonement of Christ, but we don't live through it. And we need to go through the power of the atonement. We need to feel it in our hearts. Let Him take the burden. We can leave it at His feet. Not only bad times, but in good times as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You coming to Canada it sort of culture shock, right?
Yes.
It wasn't all like right off the bat a good time for you, was it?
No. Coming to Canada is one thing. Shortly after I came to Canada, I went to United States and lived there for 2 years. That was another culture shock that I have to get adjusted to.
Yeah.
But I can see a big difference between two countries. I was blessed to live in both of them.
Yeah.
And they're different people. Yeah.
You lived in, it talks about because of
Salisbury, Maryland, yeah.
Is it because your husband's work required travel?
Correct.
Which is kind of a nomadic lifestyle.
Yep.
And that's got to be tough because you never get to really plant any roots very deeply anywhere you go.
But to me, it wasn't really difficult at all because I was living a nomadic lifestyle since birth, so it didn't really matter.
So you're pretty used to it then.
I
guess,
now
but-
consider myself a citizen of the world. I don't really care for one country or one flag. I can be happy when Canada is at the Olympics as much as I can be happy when America is doing something, and I can be just happy when Turkey is doing something. So to me, there are no boundaries. Yeah.
You mentioned that you got to travel because of your husband's work.
Yes.
You got to travel to
all over the world.
How many different countries? Have you
Many.
been to?
I don't even have a number, but we have been from the United States to Japan to Malaysia to Thailand to Europe to 40 states in the United States.
Boy, oh
It's
boy.
like,
You
I
really-
think he has traveled more than I did in the U.S. because he's seen like 48 states.
So you really are a citizen of the world.
Citizen of the world, yeah.
It's
It's
amazing.
awesome. Yeah.
The perspective that you have is very unique, and that's why I want to interview you. So
Thank you.
very,
You're very kind.
You're very, very
kind.
fascinating.
You're very kind. Yeah, I'm looking at you, and your heritage is telling me you're from somewhere else, and each heritage has a unique story. And I think in Canada and in North America, we're blessed with that.
Yeah.
We're blessed with the fabric of our lives that it has many colors and many textures in it. And I look at you and I'm thinking, what beautiful experience you bring to our society and make it even more unique. You know?
Yeah, my mom's Chinese.
Chinese,
That's where I get my half Chinese look from.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you at one point lived in Winnipeg?
Yes, I was in Winnipeg.
Now, this is an interesting part of the story.
Yes.
Because, for me anyways, for a couple of reasons, this is, the Book of Mormon translation part kind of comes in this part.
That's right, yeah. I had a lot of time in Winnipeg, worked on it, that's right, yeah.
You mentioned some people
Yes.
that really helped you out during
Yes.
that time.
Yes.
It's funny because you mentioned Steve and Penny Dyson.
Correct.
There. My parents know Steve and Penny Dyson from
Right.
when they lived in Thunder Bay.
That's right.
Because that's where I'm from
Yeah.
way back,
Yeah.
is Thunder Bay. And then
See, I told you, we're becoming,
it is a small world. And
it's
then
a
when
small,
and
we're
then
coming full circle.
later on when I was in Mississauga, where
Yes.
Steve and Penny moved in
That's
to
right.
Mississauga
yeah.
at that time. And so it was...
yeah, they have been a tremendous strength to me
Yeah.
over the years. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So can you talk a little bit about that Winnipeg period where the whole translation thing came up?
Yes. Yeah. When we first moved to Winnipeg, I was introduced to this work, and after the interview, they found me worthy to work as a content reviewer and translator. And we just slowly started the process. It took many years to put it together, but we have a finished copy. So it's wonderful to be able to read it in your own language, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. We'll talk more about that in the part two,
Okay.
in the part 2 section.
Sure.
Just wanted to see if I got all of the things I wanted to talk about. I think we got, actually there is some things that that we didn't get to. I mean, we touch on so many different topics, and really in a nutshell, and really to get the full story, you got to get the book. Okay.
You're very kind.
And we talked a lot about mental health. We didn't really get so much into
My depression.
Your depression. Well, first, starting with. Well, certainly this is probably tied with it. Your mother's mental health issues, which go right back to when you were a child, and it doesn't.
Yes.
We don't learn in the book until later on that she actually suffers from schizophrenia.
Yes.
Is it? Which would have been an enormous challenge for
all of us.
for anybody, and then to not know what it was until later on, not be diagnosed. You
Yes.
mentioned that she's claimed to not have any mental health issues at all,
Yeah.
and not medicated, and
No,
all of these.
that's right, yeah.
All of these things. So, what is the? Can you talk a little bit about that? Growing up in that, and then later on, your own struggles with mental health.
It is a strange experience to grow up with a mentally challenged person. It really is. Not at the time. Because when you're young, when you're little, you think that's it. That's your whole world. That's your normal. Exactly.
Yeah.
But once you move into the society and come back and visit where you started, then you see the difference. And now I feel for my mother. I really do. It must have been tremendously difficult for her to function in a society that she didn't feel that she belonged to, because she lived in her own little world. And those two worlds were often colliding with crashing and banging. You could hear the noise coming out of the two worlds colliding almost daily. After I left her and came back, I realized what a difficult time she had in life. And there was no solution to it. So when I first adopted my child, the first years, it was extremely difficult for me because I thought I was going to be just like my mother. And I was scared to do the wrong thing. This is when Christ entered my heart and to my world fully. Because I was really converted at that time. Baptism doesn't convert you. Attending sacrament doesn't convert you. It's a process, yes, that helps you get converted. But it's you that you convert yourself. So when I realized if I don't want to be like my mother, I better learn different ways. So I started learning about different things in life. Trusting the Lord, to be with Him and allowing Him to be with me. And step by step, and my husband and people who loved me and surrounded me, letting them come into my world and see my weaknesses so I can turn them into a strength. I do have difficulty with depression. It comes and goes. There are days that I'm extremely depressed. There's nothing I can do about it. I take medication for it. But as a counselor once told me, he said, living with the past is like diabetes. There is no cure for it, but if you take enough insulin, you can have a normal life. So living with the past is like that. If you take enough dosage of Christ into your life daily, you can you can lead and live a normal life. Yeah.
I love that. Enough dosage of Christ.
Yeah,
I never
exactly.
thought of it like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It is like that.
For sure. For sure.
Being depressed is miserable. There is no doubt about it. Anybody who's gone through depression. But it doesn't end there if you let it. Like, the depression doesn't have to define you.
Does it, for you, like for some people that I know that are very close to me, it comes every year around the same time. Is it like that for you?
No, mine comes, I have tremendously bad times every 10 years or so. It's like every decade. Something happens in my life that I build up, and one day it just explodes. But now I'm aware of it. So when it comes, it's shorter duration, and I turn to the Lord even more so than I would normally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a little easier knowing that
Right.
this is normal. This
exactly.
is just what happens to me.
Exactly,
and, and we can get through it.
Exactly.
I've
So
gotten
I'm
through
not
it
ashamed of crying. I'm not ashamed of letting people know I'm not doing well. I am a very capable individual. I don't say why me. In fact, now I say why not me, because I have the tools to be able to deal with it. Sometimes I say, I'm so grateful it's not my son or my husband is going through this, because they wouldn't know what to do with it. But I do know what to do with it. So it's better me than them suffering it.
Sometimes it's comforting. I mean, I don't know if that's the right word, but to know that someone else has gone through it.
Of course, yeah.
And,
of course, yeah.
because mental health is one of those things
Yes.
where people that don't really understand or are just not educated about it and don't really have much experience with it.
Exactly.
It's easy to be judgmental.
Yes.
You know, like,
absolutely.
why are you depressed? Why don't you just...
Yes. Why can't you just,
just snap
shake
out of it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shake it off and move on. You can't.
Yeah.
Because some of our depression is tied to chemical imbalances with our minds and our bodies, in our brains. So we couldn't just do it. You need to learn to live with it.
Yeah, and that's just one of the elements. Like you said, it's like having diabetes.
Exactly.
We don't say to someone with diabetes, "Why don't you just stop having diabetes?"
Yeah. Why don't you just grow out of it? You can't.
Yeah. And I think that's to from the place where you came from, where there was severe. You got to the point where your body was shutting down because of traumas and because of issues that you were struggling with.
Yeah, but to really give credit to the Lord, I would say some of the things we do, we inflict ourselves with it. We think too much, we analyze too much, we don't trust enough. We always think the outcome should be to our favor because we wanted it so. So when you put all of those pressures on top of each other, we're like a pressure cooker. If you don't relieve the valve once in a while, guess what's going to happen? It's going to blow up. That's what happens to us.
Yeah.
So by coming closer to the Lord, and the Lord gently just, releases the pressure valve once in a while and says, let it go. It's okay. It's okay. Let it go. So I learned that. Many years later, mind you, but I learned it.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the whole process of adoption in your family, where that begins and where that ends.
Okay. My mother, who adopted me, was an adopted child. And then she adopted me, and we couldn't have any children, so I adopted my beautiful son, John Bryant Hitchins, when he was 8 weeks old. Mm-hmm. And if he adopts a child, I'm calling the Guinness World Book of Records because it could be like 4 generations. Where does the adoption begin? I don't know, because I really don't have a very pleasant experience. It could be a good experience. I didn't have one. But where does it end? It never ends. It's a labor of love. With my son, he's a strong young man who is now 27. He's attending Rexburg, BYU, Idaho. And he's married to a wonderful young lady, Stephanie. And they're happily ever after. They have a very, very good story together. They even have a little dog named Rufus. They're happy. And none of the things that I've experienced as difficulty as an adopted child is translated into my son's life, because I made a difference in my life, saying to myself, I'm going to make a change, and I'm not going to be like my mother. I'm not going to make the same mistakes. I'm going to be different. And to best of my knowledge, I think I have achieved that. He, when he grew up, never questioned his worth. He never questioned his place in life. In fact, he has this sense of entitlement that he's my son, you know?
Yeah.
And that change came when we actually sealed him to us in the temple, in Toronto Temple, with the sure knowledge that he is my son. So there is really no question about it. He is my son and he's my son. That's the end of story, you know?
Yeah.
But adoption, the story never ends. It just, you know, eternities. It goes.
Yeah. What lessons do you learn, or can we learn from the whole idea of adoption? If you cannot adopt a child, if you don't trust yourself, don't do it. Because you will always have that question mark that you cannot get rid of. It's totally 100% a labor of love. And once you own that child as your own, he becomes part of you. So giving birth to a child doesn't necessarily create family ties. It only creates a tie that tells you that you came from a certain family. But when you adopt a child, you are doubly aware of where that child comes from, how long that child is going to be with you, and one day you're going to turn that child over to the Lord, because he belongs to the Lord. He's a gift from the Lord, and he will take him back one day. Yeah.
So it's a different kind of attitude.
Yeah. Kind of ties back to, I think, in Scripture, the being adopted into.
Exactly. Because now, if you look back, you wouldn't find any difference between the Jew and a Gentile anymore.
That's right.
We are all part of the Christ's fold.